Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today, DeadDuck, the tall lady, and I will be talking about violent behavior among women and how they are dealt with by law enforcement and the courts, and what we think should be done differently. Pull up a stump and join us. And DeadDuck, uh, let's start off with what you have to say about it.
Right, okay, so I'll start off with this article that we've got. And it's female prison reform boss jailed for worst case of coercive behaviour judge had ever seen. Senior manager subjects husband to 15 years of daily wine-fueled beatings, verbal humiliation, and even made him clean up her defecations. So this is a 45-year-old woman who's recently convicted in the UK of coercive and controlling behaviour and actual bodily harm. Unfortunately, she could only be prosecuted um, for the last 5 years due to a law change back in 2015, which brought in the coercive and controlling behaviour element of domestic abuse, although obviously that's always been present. Now, for what was some 15, 20-year long campaign of violence and abuse against her husband, she has received 4 years in prison, a 4 year custodial sentence, which to my mind is absolutely laughable. And if people just um, want to have a look at this article, we'll put it in the description for you. Yeah, I'm just going to talk about the way this article sort of portraying her. The first picture of this woman is she looks very bereft. Her arms are folded, sort of defensive posture, all dressed in black, slightly unkempt looking hair, which blowing in the wind. Her husband, who is the victim, he appears to have I wouldn't say a smile on his face, but the whole body language is a bit more open. And then when you scroll down, you find pictures of this woman looking all glamorous and, made up for the cameras and big, silly, goggly eyed glasses that women have been wearing that, I don't get. I think they look horrible, but whatever. It's not really the point of what we're discussing today. And I think, you know, this has got to change. It's little more than a slap on the wrist in reality. She's absolutely destroyed this man. There's probably no chance he will ever be able to have a relationship again. I mean, some of the things that she's been calling him, I'm not going to repeat. But I mean, one thing here that she's told him, or she's warned him, you will learn. It's like she viewed him as a child, and that she thought herself that much better than him. And part of her job basically meant that she had the ear of the then Prime Minister while this was all going on. Erin he warned us about women's violence in the home 50 something years ago, and we did nothing about it. In fact, we did worse than do nothing about it. We brought in a system of domestic violence intervention which favoured women, undoubtedly, which is called the Duluth model, which basically says only women are victims and only men are perpetrators. And really, we're starting to see the truth come out about how badly some women can behave when they think they have the law on their side. I know, obviously, Taz, you've said what your personal view is, and that's just stop getting into relationships essentially, and this stuff will go away. But that's not in the real world. That's not practical. I don't think MGTOW is catching on fast enough to make that possible. I could be wrong. It's not unheard of, but yeah. And the other thing we need to do is get rid of these judges if they're going to be biased. I'm not going to say the name of the judge on here. People can go and read it for themselves. If this is the worst case of controlling and coercive behaviour you've ever seen, you gave this woman a 4 year sentence, then you haven't seen an awful lot, have you? Because I can guarantee there's going to be far worse out there. And the level of physical abuse she also subjected this man to. He talks in his victim impact statement at the top of the article about going into the fetal position to try and protect himself. Nobody should have to live like that, man or woman, and it's absolutely ridiculous. I think what really needs to happen with these cases is, unfortunately, guys, if you're in this situation, as much as it's frightening as much as the law would seem to not be on your side. You've just got to speak out. You've got to say, this is happening to me. I am being abused. And unfortunately, I say take what comes after that. It's not a nice way to put it, but it's the only way I can really put it, and hope that you get a judge on your side, or not a judge necessarily, but the police are going to be on your side. It is getting better. This isn't the first case I've heard of. There was another one. Young lad by the name of Alex Skill, and I will research that for you now very quickly, who was the victim of horrendous abuse by his ex-girlfriend. She really did do a number on the lad. He suffered terribly. He's got knife wounds to both arms, burns, everything else, and it actually took a highly courageous police officer to turn around and say, look, mate, I know what's going on here. They were in private. They were in the police car. And he said, look, I know what's going on. I know you're being abused. Just let me help you. And in the end, Alex did. And if people want to look into Alex's story, I would suggest a documentary by the BBC called Abused by My Girlfriend, because it covered everything. But again, she got a sentence which was little more than a slap on the wrists. And unfortunately, that's the legal system. It's the way it is. It needs to change desperately. And slowly but surely that is happening. But I personally think men need to start speaking out more when they are being subjected to this kind of abuse. Tall lady, what do you think?
God, these cases with the law and the way the law reacts to it is just really harsh. Mike, you weren't here when we had this conversation, but as you know, we have the group we're in before this, and someone had brought up that I forgot what state it was, but there was a place where they've now set up that if a guy comes in to complain his phone's broken, and it was pretty obvious, like it wasn't a place, it was an insurance agency. It was an insurance agency, and the thing is, they had some of these guys who were coming in, their phones were constantly being broken by their girlfriends out of jealousy and abuse and everything. So they started trying to force a policy where if you wanted, to do a claim on your phone, that if they could pretty much tell you were the abuse and stuff, you had to go to the police and file for domestic violence, because there's just too many guys coming in with broken phones every other month or something because of their girlfriends breaking them. And they created this out of the fact that men were too scared to go to the police to report domestic violence, because male victims of domestic violence, they're not given as much help or resources as a female victim of domestic violence. They're very biased against male victims in general. There was an episode of a TV show, Law and Order. I know I'm using a lot of examples, so apologies on that. They did an episode, and it was it was a guy who sort of looked like you, DeadDuck, but with like an American hillbilly beard. And the storyline was he was a victim of abuse and domestic violence from his tiny little wife. And you see the officers in this episode assume, because they get a call about an issue in the house, and they immediately assume that he is not the victim. They assume that she is the wife. And by the time that they finally realize who the victim is, they've already left his place, left him and his wife alone again, and she's managed to kill him. And one of the officers in the episode had a feeling that he was holding something back, but instead of questioning further or trying to make an open space of sorts, I guess, for this guy to talk his mind or to take him away like they did the wife, so he can talk about it openly without feeling like threatened or anything, they just said, nah, it's impossible. Walked away, left, and they're going to call about a disturbance again, and came back and he's dead. So it's a real issue, the way law enforcement reacts, the way they're trained, the way they go about these kind of situations. They aren't used to being trained for it. They're used to immediately assuming that the victim is the woman. And DeadDuck, do you want me to talk about the article you've put in here?
No, do you know what? Actually, when you said about that episode of Law and Order,
Mhm.
this is what jumped to my mind. It was actually covered on a British TV series, real life. I can't remember. Was it 24 Hours in Police Custody? Was the name of the actual program? The Channel 4,
Wow.
right? He'd been being abused, and the police had been trying to nail this woman multiple times. And eventually, he put in somebody called the police and said, you know, that there's this domestic incident going on. The guy's badly beaten up. He's in a right state. And finally, there's actually a video of it. He rings 999 and reports her for domestic abuse, domestic violence. And then while he's in hospital, he recants. So obviously she's been to speak to him. He died shortly thereafter. She actually was prosecuted. What was she prosecuted for? She was found guilty of actual bodily harm and was given a 50-week sentence, so less than a year. And with time served, she was released. So, that wasn't even the last time she was put away. That was one of the first times she was put away. Yeah. Again, I think it's an article we'll have to put in the chat or in the description for this so people can read it. Yeah. Oh, sorry. She got 16 months, so a year and a quarter for what was basically domestic homicide. She beaten him multiple times. He died of a bleed on the brain. So, this is the other thing. See, the courts need to start taking this a bit more seriously. Guys need to speak out, and the courts need to be taking it more seriously. I think, to be honest with you, the police are doing their absolute damnedest, particularly in the UK, from what I can tell. They are trying desperately to help guys that are being abused. And to a certain degree, I think some of the guys aren't helping themselves particularly here. But,
Yeah.
Guys need to be reporting this, and the courts need to be taking it a damn sight more seriously and treating it as the serious crime that it is. She got the woman in the second article basically got 16 months for murder.
Yeah.
Taz, I don't know what you want to say about it, but
Well, whenever, and just lately, there's been a lot of media coverage, a lot of just discourse and discussion over all of this. And I look back to try to pick out a pattern, and once again, it just comes back that like Tall Lady said, the police don't appear to be properly trained to handle us as victims of intimate partners, and they're not. And when it gets so bad that these women are brought into court, the court is very reluctant to sentence a woman to anything like what they would sentence a man to. And it just occurs to me again and again that there's a reason for all of this, right? That basically that part of the system is simply not set up to deal with women as perpetrators in any way. They don't have the prison facilities. They don't have the public will. They don't have the like monetary and political support in order to really like I say, to do anything about this. And so they kind of look for any means possible to make sure that they don't have to deal with it, right? And they make sure that everyone is comfortable, or that most people are comfortable with the fact that they don't know what to do with it, so they don't do anything. But now that that tide is turning in the public, they're, like I said, they're it appears like they're looking for any kind of half measures that will quiet the public, right? Giving such a woman some kind of a sentence, and it isn't just that they don't have room for that one woman, but they understand very clearly that if this was really, properly balanced and really based on justice, that the prison system would be overrun in less than a month. They just wouldn't have anywhere to put them. The prison system and the judiciaries, prison systems plural, and judiciaries plural, and law enforcement communities plural, they are designed to go after men. That's what they're there for. That's what everybody's paid for. That's what the public will is willing to, to support, right? But the will of the public is even now still not yet willing to just look at this and say it's time to start, throwing very violent women into prison like we do with men and keep them there. Because right now, the money is contingent on political and public will, and it doesn't exist yet. The concern that somebody like me has is, will will the public concern and the public will catch up with this problem before it's too late? And when DeadDuck, you pointed out that this is why things like men going their own way is unrealistic at this time. Well, my response to that is, yeah, you're right. At this time, it's not realistic. What if it becomes realistic? Because right now, let's face it, the men out there that are unwilling, to have any involvement with women or fatherhood or being family life, they've never heard of MGTOW. They're not political at all. They're not standing up and saying that here is the reason I'm doing this, and I'm not going to change how I'm doing this until all of these things are changed. Now I'm doing that. Some few others are doing that, but not very many. Most of them are just basically, trying to protect themselves. But unfortunately, it's like the labor movement, it didn't start out as this well-oiled and well-organized economic and political institution. It was just very poor people trying to protect themselves from, permanent poverty and threats to their life. It became an institution. It became, part of an overall movement because things just got that bad. Now I don't think I have to tell you that because it took that long for it to get organized that way, that created a lot of other problems that we face, that persist to this day, right? With things like labor movements. And like I said, we really can't afford that when it comes to gender relationship. Men can say, that if something isn't done, this is what you will have. You will have an exodus of men from society in general, but that's the thing you want to avoid, right? That's the thing that you want to have be unfeasible forever, and like I said, right now it's only unfeasible for right now, and it's getting a little more feasible every day.
Yeah. I support MGTOW to the point of view of I understand it. I understand why there are men that want to do that. I think it is a logical response to a lot of the stuff that is happening, but it's not a response I want to see. Unfortunately, there is an awful lot of damage that has been done from feminism and everything else. And I think another thing judges need to start doing in the courts is shooting down the whole self-defense defense. you get these women going to court that have badly attacked or even murdered their boyfriends or husbands. Another article I found, another one for Taz to put in the description. This woman stabbed her boyfriend to death and then claims self-defense. And unfortunately, it's another one of these what I call believable lies. It's why feminism has worked so well. It's got the backup of the believable lie. The guy was much bigger than the woman in this particular case, and I thought and he's the one who's ended up dead. But if she claims that he was attacking her and she only grabbed the knife out of self-defense to get him off of her, people are going to believe it. I don't think they should, because it's a defense that's been used far too often. There was a case in the UK where a woman drove over 10 miles to her ex-husband's house and murdered him in cold blood. And she used the, well, he was abusing me for years defense. And it worked.
And it shouldn't have.
No, it shouldn't. It's another thing that needs to change within the courts. These women who are violent, abusive, and I think that statistically women are more likely to use a weapon as a equalizer, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
I think also women are more likely to use things like poisons if they actually want to kill their partner. So that's also a thing. But we need to get rid of this whole the self-defense in the courts as well. Judges need to just shoot that one straight down. Like, no, that's not a defense. Unless you have actual physical proof from a doctor that you have defensive wounds and that the only way you could have done this is whilst being attacked, then no, sorry, not buying it. Not buying at all. And I see, Tall Lady, you've put an article in there. I think it's the young woman who basically
coerced a guy into committing suicide.
Coerced a boyfriend into killing himself, who I think was suffering from severe mental health issues and wasn't getting any kind of support. I can't remember if it was out of choice or lack of availability. But again, this is another way abusive women will attack their partner is through this sort of non-physically violent means.
Mm-hmm.
They will push and push and push mentally and emotionally and verbally until either he snaps, in which case you've got a real problem on your hands, or in the case of the story you've linked, he ends up taking his own life, which you could also argue, I suppose. You say he snapped and decided to end it.
Right.
But
yeah. Well, I was just going to say in all of these discussions, like I said, there's an element of just people's reluctance to take that kind of a hard look at it and say, something needs to be done here, right? Long ago, the general just crime problem, has been addressed by various means throughout history, focusing on, on men who committed crimes, and, at best, women that were too big of a nuisance to, the leadership in a culture or a society or even a village. But it was never countenanced that women could be a direct threat, to anyone, to their life, right? And until, most people can just sit down and say, not only can they be that kind of threat, some of them are. And the good news is we're not talking about anything like a majority of women. We're talking just like with men. It's a pretty small few that are unhinged or antisocial enough, or psychopathic enough to become criminals, to become violent, to become abusive, that leads to actual harm and even death. It's not very many women, and it's not very many men either. But right now, there's better in the US, there's better than 2 million men, doing time in the jail and prison system. There isn't anything close to that among women, and it's like I point out to people, that says one of two things. Either A, men are just many, many hundreds of times more likely to be criminals than women are, or women can also be criminals. We're just not doing anything about it. And it's like both of those are pretty, hard realities. I'm not saying that, I would be overjoyed if tomorrow the scales of justice suddenly balanced out and they were, prosecuting and appropriately sentencing women the same as men. But this isn't about what I like, right? I mean, my personal preference is that people not be criminals. I am never going to get that wish, right? No matter what. Right? And so, what I'm left with is, either accept the status quo with the understanding that it'll never be anywhere close to just, or push and speak out and address the idea that it is unjust and we can't sustain it that much longer. Now that men are beginning to talk, which is, we're constantly accused of not being willing to talk about our own vulnerabilities and about our own susceptibility to be victims. So now we're talking about it. The trouble is that comes at a price. That's not free. It means that if we're going to talk about it and we're going to make it public, that means that we're doing it with the expectation that something will be done about it. If nothing is done about it, by that time it's too late to just go back to where we were before. And like I said, the same men that are speaking out to the world and saying, we can be victims and many of us are being abused. Then, like I said, then the trouble starts. Right? Then things get bad. Right. And, again, one man's opinion, but, the only reasonable thing in the short term to do about that is, for people in general to start insisting on real justice. The long term, in my opinion, is that we don't have anything like the kind of law enforcement structure that we have now, because it does more harm than good. We don't have anything like the judicial system that we have right now. It does more harm than good. And that, the will of the people stop relying so much on on those systems to keep order. Right. They've proven beyond any reasonable doubt that they can't do it. They freely admit, when you listen to them talk, they freely admit, that they're incapable of maintaining social order all on their own. Now, they usually do that with their hand out. But they're not wrong. They're not equipped and they're not designed to maintain, social order and, good old domestic tranquility. They fail at it routinely. And, the blame for that rests with everybody, because everybody who is having the expectation that they will keep social order and maintain domestic tranquility. They can't do it. And it's unreasonable of us to ask them to.
Wasn't there a thing, a statistic that if men and women were sentenced equally, 95% of the men currently in prison wouldn't actually be there, or something completely mental in America?
I think that's an exaggeration, but not by very much. And it's a hyperbole to make a point. That it isn't necessarily that every one of those 95% doesn't belong in prison, because they might, but rather that if the system was just, there would be, an equal percentage of women serving time. And
Yeah.
the whole point of saying things like that is to point out the fact that, whether it's all men, all women, or mostly men and very few women or whatever, it's not working.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's only a problem now because men are beginning to wake up.
Yeah.
As I've told you so many times, it's in the long run, it is a good thing for men to wake up, for men to speak out, for men to look after each other, even at the expense of the social pressure being put on them. But it's not free.
Yeah.
It will have a price. It will mean everybody has to start to make sacrifices that they're not going to want to make.
Yeah.
And to just reasonably present to them that we're running out of other options, okay, is, that's a kindness to them.
Yeah.
To just say, look, there's no way to force you to change your thinking on this. All I'm doing is telling you what is bound to happen if you don't change your thinking on it. And there won't be anything anyone can do about it.
Yeah. What's basically going to happen is men are going to walk away.
Yeah. And when I say walk away, I mean, from engagement with society.
Yeah.
That's like, I tell people in the other circles I go in, you all admire and respect and appreciate me for living the way I do, and the reason why I live the way I do. But I said, imagine if there was tens of millions of us. Just here in America, that's out of roughly not quite 200 million men. Say 25 million men just pulled up stakes, moved into one-bedroom apartments, kept low profile jobs with no ambitions for career advancement, no children, and no wife or partner of any kind. Can you imagine what that kind of world would look like? See, I'm telling you, you don't want that.
No, you
nobody does.
And it's sort of sadly going that way, to be honest.
Yeah, and I repeat, you don't want that. That would be bad. It would not be good.
And people don't realize that. They don't.
No.
The men of today are. I know someone is gonna blame video games, and I can see where they're coming from. That this isn't video games' fault. Believe me, I feel that. I sit here, I look at my brother, and he's playing video games on a computer all day long. But we are, when you look at the TV, when you look at social media, it's great to see programs that support women, but the thing is, that's all it is.
Yeah.
No one's talking about supporting men. There's no talking about leadership opportunities for them, or there's no, nobody's making the effort to really reach out and go, hey, this might be something that interests you. Hey, let me try to get you excited about this. There's no pep talk, no excitement, nothing.
It's
There's just, they sort of got to figure it out on their own. They're walking around blind.
It's because the kind of the guys that do turn around and say, look, lads, this is what you could be, get shot down as misogynists. You look at the way Jordan Peterson was treated when he sort of burst onto the scene. Here is a guy turning around and saying, look, guys, this isn't all on you. The rest of us have to bear some responsibility for the position you now find yourselves in. But you sitting here moaning about it, complaining about it, and sitting on your hands and not doing anything to try and solve the problem isn't going to go well for you. He was scathing about MGTOW early on, and then but that was mainly because he didn't understand MGTOW.
Right. But strictly speaking, he was correct.
Yeah.
That only wailing and complaining about it, or like I said, just completely withdrawing from social life and any hope for the future, like I said, that's the thing to be avoided, right? That's like I say, the difference between a strike and a mass walkout is that, a strike, it comes with the promise that, look, we'll come right back to work and we'll redouble our efforts and be as talented and productive as before, as soon as you like do some stuff to make sure that we don't die on the job and that we can feed our families. But like I say, just a mass walkout is where everybody abandons the job with no intention of ever coming back. Right. And, there is a difference there. And right now, too many of these young men, without speaking up and, without a demand for a better situation, they're just saying, well, I'm not going to bother, and I have no hope, so I won't even try. And there, it doesn't have to be that way. You can disengage, and you can present, the lack of a better term, the threat of disengagement, but at the same time, to make sure that everybody understands the reason why I'm doing this is because things are unacceptable now. If you make them acceptable, I'm right back in the game, and I'll do my best, and I'll, like Jordan Peterson said, I'll pick up my heaviest burden and carry it for as long as I can. But if all you're going to do is have me pick up my burden and carry it off a cliff, I'm not going to do that. It's not that complicated, really, at the end of the day, and like I say, the things that Peterson was saying, as far as he went, were correct, but what he either never got a chance to say or, didn't really take the time to say was that, doing things that way is an option for young men. Right? It's a very uncomfortable and very unhappy final solution. But if it stays unthinkable, then what happens instead is that, instead of doing that and instead of thinking about it, young men will just give up because that's what they're doing. They will either stop trying or they'll never begin to try in the first place. They'll look around at their families and the devastation of the grown men in their lives, as a result of family court and disparities, in the workplace and disparities in the education system. And, even young, inexperienced men are not entirely stupid. They will look at that and say, I am pretty much guaranteed not to get anything worthwhile out of trying to make this work. So my better option is just not to try. The only thing they fail to do, and the only thing that Jordan Peterson and really any of the other, I guess, celebrity male mentors, the thing that they failed to do was say that if you are going to disengage like that, you want to tell everybody why. And you want to leave it with the promise that, you will come back and begin to try as long as, it's reasonable to do so. But until it's reasonable to do so, it's unreasonable to try. Like I said, when you think about it carefully, it's not that complicated. It's basically comes down to, do what you must and do what you ought to do, but don't do something stupid.
At the moment, for the most part, being in a relationship is a stupid idea. And I'm looking at this from across the pond, by the way. I would not touch 99% of American women if you paid me. If I was even involved in the dating game, I just wouldn't go near you ladies, sorry. There is some really severe stuff going on there. And unfortunately, a lot of it is just, in quotation marks, positive messaging that these women have been given over the years. That you're all special and you're all worthy and you should always have the best and all this sort of stuff. It's like, well, no, we're not all equal, I'm afraid.
DeadDuck, I think even UK lesbians wouldn't want the American woman.
Well, no, I mean,
and you can't blame them.
No, but whether it's here or across the pond or most of the West, really, the good news is that very quietly and way too slowly, that is beginning to change, and tall lady, you are some of the evidence of that. I am aware of lots of women in your cohort that they're just disgruntled for your own reasons about how things are right now, and becoming more vocal and less like tolerant of it all the time. And many of you are starting to to point that intolerance and that disgruntlement at women, which I suppose that's fine. Like I said, it only making it about them resolves about 50% of the problem, which this isn't the kind of problem that you only want to do halfway. This is one of those jobs where you really want to tackle the whole thing. And for myself and for DeadDuck, our responsibility, as I say, is to make it clear that not only is something wrong, but there will be consequences if it's left wrong, right? And those consequences aren't going to be directed by any one man or any group of men. These are things that are going to happen all on their own, that they will just happen. It will be inevitable. And if it does, then by the time it happens, even if everybody wants to roll up their sleeves and work their butts off to fix it, it'd be too late.
Yep. Bus is already off the cliff.
Yeah. And all there will be is picking up pieces, and there won't be that many. I mean, some, yeah. People are resilient and people are adaptable. But it won't be anything like the way we live now.
No.
And like I said, that you all, among men, that should always be presented as something that is not impossible, but to be avoided at all costs. And among women, it's basically the same, that it's not, that they need to be made aware that this is not, this kind of collapse is not impossible. It not only can it happen, if things stay the way they are, it will happen. And that just sitting around and fretting about it, or sitting around and blaming men for it, will only make it happen that much faster. Like I said, it's it
And the
won't,
bigger problem is
there
sitting
won't even
around
be
and
anyone to blame. By the time this happens, there won't even be a bad guy, right? It'll just be everybody. We all let it collapse. I'm sorry, what were you gonna say?
I would say at this point, it's not even just like sitting around and fretting or blaming one another. It's sitting around and trying to simplify it. That's really the biggest issue. No one's talking about it in the cold. I know I say this almost every episode, but in a hard, complex way, it needs to be everyone simplifying it. That's all feminism is, to me at least. At this point, is women just trying to simplify the complexity of the issues they claim they're trying to solve in ways that sometimes really end up hurting their own fellow male friends or fellow females as well.
Right. Hurting their efforts. And, to give them some credit, I think it is important to simplify the problem itself, what they aren't happy with. Because people, people are people. And when, something is making them unhappy and they don't know what to do about it, they, all of a sudden get really philosophical and metaphorical and make it complicated. But, really the thing to be feared is not a complicated thing. The thing to be feared, like I said, is the disengagement of men and boys from social life and social order, because once that happens, then it's not recoverable. But the second, step number 2 is to figure out what to do about it. And, I've already pointed out that for men, really, and boys, the thing to do next, is to outline the risks of leaving things the way they are, and saying that men and boys are not going to just throw a tantrum and like flounce out of the room. They're just going to quietly give up, and many of us give up in a very permanent way. Many of us give up entirely. Like I said, none of that stuff is a good outcome. None of it. And for men, our role is to say none of that is a good outcome. Let us work together to make sure that no matter what else happens, that never happens.
Yeah.
Like at all costs, it is to be avoided. But for women, like I said, job one of what to do about it, is to come to grips among yourselves that it's possible, that and it's becoming more likely every day, and that continuous admonition and dismissal and indifference and disregard to the issues that men and boys have is going to make it happen that much faster.
Yep.
So the good news is, the first thing to do is nothing, right? The first thing to do is stop doing what you're doing. The second thing to do, is to, come together with us, not to be corny, but that's kind of what it is. Is to come together with us, negotiate with us, figure out what is doable, and when to do it and who should be doing it. And what we should collectively, what we should stop doing. I've told people before that, one of those things is very likely, the traditional state-sponsored and state-controlled betrothment and marriage. One man's opinion, but I think that's got to go away. It's served out its time, and now it's time to do something else, because the fly in that ointment, even under the best circumstances, is the fact that the government is involved in what's supposed to be an intimate relationship. I just don't think it's going to work anymore.
People who say government has been involved for forever is like, marriage was something that was created to be a spiritual bond between people. When you look in ancient languages, the words that they had close or that would be used to describe marriage, well, they're spiritual words about partnership and love and things like that. Marriage itself, as a word, as a government arm, government institution, whichever word we want to use for it, was really created out of the greed of empires and the need, I don't want to say need, better word for it, the want to really keep people controlled.
Right.
But by creating laws on marriage, by creating it as this now governmental thing, it enforced people to be in a situation where they could be forced into things.
Mm-hmm.
They could be forced into this marriage for class or money or whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
Things for power.
Right.
And that's not what marriage was originally supposed to be.
No.
And the United States just didn't really give much of thought to marriage when it became the United States. It just sort of copy and pasted the UK's marriage situation and didn't think about maybe they needed to reconsider it.
Yeah. Right. And like I said, even that would have been fine if the general public, both here and over there, had said, okay, this is fine for the moment, but as time goes on, if this needs to change, we're going to expect you to change it. And if you don't change it, then we're going to find somebody who will, but people being people, as long as everything was tolerable, they just left it in the hands of the people they put it in the hands of in the first place. And I'm like, well, that's exactly how we got into this mess, right? People being just uncomfortable with individual responsibility and individual accountability for their own interests, right? I mean, one thing that I learned pretty frequently from the left is that way too many people have been conditioned into either acting to maintain the status quo against their own interests, or working to change the status quo against their own interests. And the one thing that never gets questioned is, why are we acting against our own interests? I mean, the previous iterations of feminism did things like, change the legal aspects of marriage, right? And the legal aspects of reproduction, and the legal aspects of intimate relationships, right? And which is fine, except they once again resolved exactly 50% of the problem, right? And they left the other 50% in the hands of the people who screwed it up in the first place. And now we have what we have, and everyone seems dissatisfied with it. But most of the time, outside of spaces like this, nobody points out the idea that the people currently controlling all this have no incentive to change a darn thing until we give them one, until we show them it's unwise to continue doing what you are doing, and it's also unwise to not do what we expect you to do. But right now, like I said, there's the will of the public is still struggling to even come to grips with that it is going to be us, and the ones that are aware of it and willing, too often are willing to do it at the expense of the other side, so to speak. And I'm like, it's never, tell me, look me in the face and tell me, if you get everything you want, everything's going to be fine from then on. Okay? Because I look back at history and I say, it just doesn't seem to play out like that. That's not how stuff works. I wish it did, but we are humans. We're not termites, right? We're not eusocial. we're social by choice,
Yeah.
And so it's like just the way it is, and we'll either address and accommodate and resolve all that stuff all together, or we won't. But the universe is a brutal tyrant. It does not care if we survive or not, and it never has. If we check out tomorrow as a species, the universe is going to spin on like we were never here.
Yeah. One legal change that has really made a mess of things is no fault divorce, because previously, you had to answer for your reasons for wanting a divorce, i.e., abuse, infidelity, what have you. But now it's just a case of you can get divorced because you're unhappy in the marriage.
Sure.
As I said, nobody said marriage is easy and marriage is going to be this dancing through green fields experience. It's not. Marriage is hard work.
Right.
And no fault divorce took away the reason for anyone to work hard at it.
Right. Like I said, the real core issue there is that it was ever a petition to the government to begin such a relationship, and another petition to the government to end it. Again, maybe they thought it was a good idea at the time, but clearly it failed. It just did, and it's okay. People fail, but it's never okay to look at something, admit that it failed, and then just keep doing it. That's stupid. I think we ought to tie this one off before I keep babbling. I guess we want to go around the room. Tall lady, do you have any final thoughts?
Man, when it comes to this topic, I mean, I just I like leaving final thoughts for people listening in. The only final like a thing to keep thinking about later on. The only thing I really think about is, if you're listening in, what do you want to see changed, I guess? What do it's so hard because we're talking about law and system, and that is just a legal fight. And not many people are willing to do that fight. On the other hand, are you willing to watch everything fall apart either? It's this whole need for change, and it becomes this question of how is it going to change? Like,
Right.
say the most Kennedy-ish thing, what are you doing about it in a sense?
Yeah.
Your country, what can they say? Not what your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country? I mean,
Yeah.
what can you do to save us from disaster?
Right. Yeah. Nothing wrong. That's a good final thought, because that's really the question, the the country in the body of the governments, plural, have failed us. Past tense. It's already over. They did what they did and it didn't work. So, the next question is, well, what can we do? But we have to ask that question, among ourselves. So everybody listening, please drop comments, make suggestions, tell us what you think. And DeadDuck, you want to take DeadDuck, do you want to take us out?
Yeah, I'll offer a final thought for a second. I'm going to go back to the beginning of the conversation, which was obviously discussing women's violence, particularly towards men. We've got several cases of it, and I'm going to go back to what I said earlier on as a final thought. Guys need to speak out, and the judges in these courts need to start taking this stuff way more seriously, because all the sentencing and everything is doing is showing that women can get away with, the violent women out there can get away with it easily,
Right.
even if they get caught, and that's it. And we've obviously discussed MGTOW briefly. I understand it. I know where it's coming from. I agree with it intellectually, logically. I don't like it.
Me neither.
And the irony of me saying that is, if my current relationship ended tomorrow, I would go MGTOW. I don't, at my age, with my life experience, I don't want to date. And there are women all around the world today cheering loudly into their margaritas or whatever you. But yeah, that's my final thought. Judges, sort your lives out, guys. If you're in that situation, reach out, talk.
Amen.
That's all I've got.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate this. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't, and drop us a comment. Tell us what you think ought to be done. We already know what the problem is. Just need to figure out what to do about it, because the one place we're not going to find an answer is in court or at the end of a policeman's gun. They might be the most wonderful people in the world, but they just ain't got the ponies. They don't have what it takes, and might as well just accept it. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you again next time.